Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org. Edina Eye Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years now in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services and dedicated specialists committed to excellence with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. Alan Miller with you once again, and one of our favorite and most prolific guests. Absolutely. The Honorable Paul Anderson, retired from the Minnesota Supreme Court, a frequent and really welcome guest here, always in education when Justice Anderson is with us. And in view of what's happening,
I'm going to say it's a pleasure to be back, but so much has happened since I was last on the show. It's almost overwhelming.
Well, maybe we'll have to start a serial with you. I have to point out that your lapel pin respects the Ukrainian people.
As does your tie.
And as does my tie today, yes. And that was not with coordination, that was with 2 people expressing their conscience.
Okay. By the way, talking about Ukraine, we don't want to get into that. We need to make sure that American people do not lose their moral outrage with respect to Putin. I refer to him as the butcher of Moscow.
And the Europeans as well.
Yes.
Because we have to continue furnishing them with what they need. Russia has overwhelming numbers, and we have to offset that with equipment and intelligence.
But there is a Putin wing of the Republican Party that be ready to exploit any weakness in the moral outrage of Americans for the brutality that Putin is doing. So as Americans, we have to be very much on top of this.
Well, I believe Comrade Tucker Carlson is leading that wing, and I say that because he has the full blessings of Crazy Like a Fox behind him.
Yes.
And but what I want to talk to you about in particular, with your background, your many years not only on the Minnesota Supreme Court bench, but on the Court of Appeals bench prior to that, we have had the U.S. Supreme Court, which frightens the hell out of me, frankly.
It should, actually. With
the latest appointments, the recess appointment of one judge, which Mitch McConnell blocked Merrick Garland. And maybe you want to talk to that for starters about Mitch McConnell, and then we can talk about the court itself.
I'm going to, as a lead-in and antecedent to Mitch McConnell, is the United States Supreme Court right now is in much disarray for many reasons. I'd like to get to talk about the leak and whatever. But what's happening is it is losing the trust and confidence of the American people. It is declining precipitously, and it's the result of who's been appointed, how they've been appointed, and the actions of the justices. But let's get to the point you want to make. Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is the architect of the current Supreme Court. He blocked Merrick Garland, and then he pushed through Amy Coney Barrett, and he has been, okay.
And Kavanaugh.
And Kavanaugh. I mean, from my point of view, Mitch McConnell is not a patriot because he has not obeyed his constitutional sworn obligation. I'm choking up when I... I mean, Mitch McConnell is amoral. I've used the phrase when describing him that I first heard in my professional ethics class from David Graven at law school. He is essentially, to my mind, an ethical pygmy. He has no real ethical compass other than power, and using whatever means, how amoral, unethical, he can to establish power, and he's done that with the court, and has given us a court that is way outside the boundary of what we expect.
And we have Amy Barrett, whose answer to abortion is, well, have the child, and there's plenty of places you can put it on a doorstep. To say nothing of her religious persuasion, and that shouldn't come into be a factor, but the fact of the matter is that we have almost an entirely one religion court now, and that's very dangerous.
But no, I mean, I'm going to back off from that, because if you say one religion, that one religion you talk about would be being Roman Catholic. I mean, Sotomayor is Roman Catholic. Brennan was Roman Catholic. So it's not being Roman Catholic that's the issue. It's being part of a narrow theological, ideological segment. I mean, the part of the Catholic Church...
I think of it as a cabal.
I mean, the part of the church that Amy Coney Barrett does has about 1,500 members. And it's very cultish, and their stated goal is to redesign America in their own vision, which is way outside the, spectrum of what Americans want.
So,
but I'm going to get back to McConnell.
Okay.
I mean, the upcoming Senate election is that it will be a disaster to put him back into a position of power, because, we need in this country people who have ethics and virtues. I mean, when I talk about it, there are 6 virtues: wisdom, courage, prudence, truth and integrity, and it's up on the Capitol. I do not see those virtues in so many of the current leaders. I don't see it in McConnell, and I don't see it in current members of the court.
And unfortunately, in the Republican Party, they are throwing out people who show flares of conscience, such as Kissinger
and Cheney.
And Liz Cheney, who has really been courageous.
Very courageous.
In the light of tremendous amount of abuse.
Now, it's an interesting thing right where we get here. We get a juxtaposition of Kissinger and Liz Cheney with Susan Collins out of Maine. I mean, Susan Collins has shown a lack of courage, and
I think that's an understatement.
But I mean, she has, and it's sad. She likes to cast herself as a moderator and someone who seeks the middle ground. But I mean, when push comes to shove, she doesn't have the courage to stand up.
She said Kavanaugh and who was the other one?
Gorsuch.
She said, that's not what they told me about abortion when we
That's
interviewed.
what they not told her in private, and that's not what they told her at the Senate committee.
And then they turned around and did the exact opposite. And in both cases, she chose to believe them with the pressure of the Republican Party.
This is where courage comes, okay? She had a choice. I mean, there are criteria that you use to evaluate where somebody is, how credible they are. She had many indications on the past record, whatever, where she should have come to the conclusion that their representations to her were not credible. But this is the point where her leadership fell down. She chose to believe something that, if she was really wise and prudent, she should not have.
And I give Murkowski a lot more credit than her.
She's a little more feisty, isn't she?
Yes, she certainly is.
And
you have to respect her.
I mean, Mitt Romney has let me down in many ways, but that scene of Romney while he voted for Jackson, and that scene of him standing up and applauding her confirmation, where the rest of the senators turned their backs and walked out.
Which was, it was beyond college really conduct to me.
So I've written about it recently. And it harkens back. I mean, what the Republicans did at the Jackson confirmation
you had an article in the Star Tribune.
Yeah, what they did was
only a month ago.
Horrible. I mean, and I said that, you know, when Welsh was doing the Army McCarthy hearings in the 50s, he said of Senator McCarthy, "Sir, have you no sense of decency?" That resonated with me. Do these Republicans not have any sense of decency? You know, it's decency that you learn from your parents, you learn from your house of worship, and you learn from school, and they completely forgot about it.
And I have to mention one thing about Paul Anderson. He was the campaign manager for a Republican candidate for governor by the name of Arne Carlson. He was a registered Republican all his life, and he sits here saying these things as really a reborn individual in terms of philosophy, or maybe the Republican Party has moved away from him.
I mean, this is an interesting thing that you bring up, particularly me and others. I mean, I grew up being a Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, Stas and Eisenhower Republican. My ancestors settled in Minnesota, 1850s. They revered Father Abraham. So it's in my genes, in my genetic makeup. And when the Republican Party is doing what it's doing, I have no problem saying that I have left it. Because I'm older. I don't have time for the Republican Party to reform. And if something's going to get done, I got to go to a place where it's going to get done, and that is with the Democrats right now. But many of my friends can't do this. And you know what I tell them? I give them a copy of an article by George Will. By all conventional wisdom, he's Republican, conservative.
Absolutely.
And what George Will says is that America needs a strong two-party system that cares about the common humanity of all. He said the Republican Party does not reflect that belief now. So the best thing that a Republican can do is not leave the party, but in the short term, vote for Democrats so we get rid of the current crop of leaders and replace it with people who care.
Well, I believe firmly in a two-party system.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And there are Republicans back in New York when I was a Democratic leader and got along really well with my Republican adversaries.
I supported one of them, Nelson Rockefeller. John Lindsay.
John Lindsay, certainly. Jacob Javits.
Goodell, Javits.
Jacob Javits. I mean, we had some really fine people who I supported, even though they were Republicans, because I never voted a straight party line ticket. And
but I want to transition here to something that I think the public is interested in, and is that the leak that recently came out of the Supreme Court.
The Alito Leak.
Yes. I mean, he drafted an opinion in February. Apparently it's being circulated, but it was leaked earlier in the month. This is huge. This is huge. Now, I'd say there have been other breaches of confidence in the past, but very few and on minor. This is big, and I'm going to tell you why it's big. Is that, and some people say, well, why is the court so secretive and so guarding of their process? I'll tell you why. Because to get the best opinion, You need to operate in an atmosphere where you can think out loud and not be afraid to explore all avenues, even if they are mistaken. And you have the opportunity to be wrong and to be corrected. And so, you know, it's a process.
Well, you know from your own experience that judges circulate proposed decisions, and often they are corrected, and sometimes judges change their mind.
Oh, absolutely.
And what appeared to be in the majority no longer is in the majority. You've had your own personal experience with that.
But I'm going to talk about one that's very relevant to this issue. State versus Gomez, first drafted by Chief Justice Sandy Keith. I considered it to be a horrible draft. I mean, from the point of view where Sandy was coming from, it sounded like that abortion is the kind of the best thing since sliced bread. It's a good. Abortion is not that. It is a tough moral issue that one has to wrestle with. But if that opinion had been released, there would have been, you know, uniform condemnation of the court from all sides because of the nature of the opinion. After much redrafting and much recirculating, it's still not a good opinion from my mind, but it was much better than what it was originally drafted. And the court had the opportunity to circulate it. Sandy didn't give us that chance too early on, but we revised that opinion. And that's what the court, so I don't know if the current opinion is going to come out in its current form or not.
We will know in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, by the end of June.
And
but it's important to the process. We're making law. See, Roberts was wrong when he said that what the court does is only call balls and strikes. No, it makes a lot of policy. It's going to make policy on the gun case. It's going to make policy on this abortion case. And it's made policy on arbitration cases. It's made policy with respect to dark money and campaigns. No, it makes policy all the time. And if that's going to be the impact, they got to have time to sort things through.
Well, getting back to the Gomez case, you said the Gomez case in its full scope could change things.
Well, the first thing about Gomez, I mean, it was a limited somewhat issue is whether or not state funds could be used to fund an abortion for an impoverished individual. We concluded that, you know, if abortion is legal in Minnesota, I wanted to do it under equal protection. By the way, I have had discussions with the late Justice Ginsburg on this. She agreed with me that the equal protection is a better basis. But we basically concluded that under the Minnesota Constitution, the rights of women are protected. It was a 5-to-1 decision with Gene Coyne dissenting and Stringer recusing himself. So that's the law in Minnesota. And so the immediate impact of the U.S. Supreme Court, if it overturns Roe versus Wade, will not be major in Minnesota. But that could change. And this is why elections are important. You could have a reconstituted Minnesota Supreme Court that could say we're going to overturn Gomez. Especially if they buy into the logic of Alito and the other four that says if we don't like the previous opinion, we can say it's wrong and overturn it.
And go back to the 13th century to use examples to sustain our beliefs.
Now, here I'm going to transition a little bit, is that if the court does what they are thinking of doing in Alito's opinion, it is going to change the nature of the discussion on a woman's right to choose. There's going to be a change that's going to focus on one's religion. Are the draconian laws that are being placed now violative of a person's individual theological opinion when life begins? I mean, I like to say, that is not a settled issue, and it's not been settled. Leonardo da Vinci actually gave an opinion on this and said, life does not begin at the conception. It begins at a later time. He said, I'm not sure when it begins, but he was leaning towards, when the fetus is viable.
We learned that in law school when the fetus is viable, which was about halfway through.
22 to 24 weeks.
Another thing about Roe v. Wade, and this is an article that appeared yesterday in American Jewish World that said, written by 2 Orthodox rabbis who said it would be unconstitutional to outlaw abortion because under the Orthodox concept.
Show that headline. That's exactly what I was saying.
Overturning Roe v. Wade would be an unconscionable infringement of religious freedom of Orthodox Jews.
And so, there are some members of the Jewish community, I don't agree with them, that life begins and the soul is vested at the time the left shoulder emerges from the womb.
Something like that, right.
And so, we have different religious beliefs, and what we have is a narrow group that has one religious belief that's imposing that on the rest of the country. So it's going to be, the discussion is going to center around privacy, which is in Roe. There will be more discussion on equal protection.
13th Amendment or 14th Amendment?
But then there will be this whole religious issue, is that are we infringing on a person's right to exercise their... See,
that's for me. I think that religion aside, has nothing to do with it. My concept is that no one has the right to tell anybody else what they can do with their body, especially, and I heard an analogy this week, that forcing a woman to carry to term without getting into incest and without getting into rape and without getting into the life of the mother is involuntary servitude. And I thought that was a very interesting concept.
Well, now we're going to get to another area that's going to develop in the discussion. See, bearing a child for a woman is not in and of itself an ultimate good. It has a major impact on the health and the body of the woman. You can have long-term urinary tract side effects. You can get a weakness in the back. Your other parts of your body will change. And there are some women, those changes are threatening to their health. So we're going to, as I say, we're going to have a multi-level discussion about, can we force a woman to bear a child when we have all of these other issues out there: religion, equal protection, privacy, and health.
And these states are passing laws now with a 12-year-old who's impregnated by a relative, by a father. Can we force that child? Somebody who's raped, can we force that person to carry that child? And then who takes care of that child? Who is supposed to take care of that child that's born of a violent act like that, that certainly it doesn't engender love?
This is something that perplexes me, because some of the most adamant anti-abortion people don't care at all about the care of children and their role in society after they're born. And well,
Sharon says that all the time.
Yeah, they don't care. But
we'll force you to have it, but then it's on its own, or you're on your own, and
that's just not. So there's a lot of hypocrisy. That's
great word. There
centers around this issue.
One of the most virulent anti-abortion members of the Missouri House, his girlfriend just came forward and said, but he forced me to have an abortion.
I know.
It's talk about hypocrisy.
Okay, I'm gonna touch on an issue. You're, what is it? You're 88?
Very close.
I'm 79. We're both old white guys, male, who have, had a major role in the power structure. When are we going to get away from that privilege, that male privilege, that says that we can dictate what happens to a woman and her body? Now, there are women who are anti-abortion, but you look at it, some of the most adamant people are men who, still view women...
That's their individual choice.
Yeah.
But I don't believe you have the right to impose that individual choice on anybody else when it comes to something like bearing a child.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to transition on you a little bit here, is that I'm going to say, I think John Roberts, Chief Justice, has lost or is in the process of losing control over the current court.
Oh, I think he's lost it.
You think he's lost it? I mean, you can see by him increasingly joining the moderate to left of center wing on some. I mean, he even came out recently to criticize the 5 for their use of the shadow docket. I mean, they're overturning precedent without signing an opinion or argument. But he's lost or is losing control of the court. See, Roberts should accept a fair amount of responsibility for the direction the court has taken.
And it started with Roberts.
Oh, yeah.
When he said that there is not a racial problem in this country.
Or he said that all the court does is call balls and strikes.
Right.
No. They make all kinds of policy. But that said, John Roberts is a decent human being. He is a solid judicial thinker, conservative. I don't agree with him. I have a friend who was a prep school classmate of him, lost his mother when Roberts was his roommate, said Roberts could not be more kind and understanding.
That can be, but he can have a distorted life view when it comes to the court, and he does. And we've actually run through our allotted time already. We're down to 37 minutes, so give us some closing thoughts.
Well, my closing thought is we got to do something about Justice Clarence Thomas. We got to figure out a way to hold him accountable. His actions have been unethical and maybe have violated the law. And for have one member of a 9-member highest court being unethical and disobeying the law is like, it's just a real offense. It should be offense to you and offense to me.
We've been talking with Justice Paul Anderson, late of the Minnesota Supreme Court, and one of our favorite guests, and we will have him back shortly.
Next we can go into a little more detail on Thomas and Ginny Thomas and some of the things that are undermining the trust and confidence in the court.
Justice Anderson, thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure.